Welcome back to Candid Conversations on Leadership. And today we have a guest with us, Chris.
We do. Is that why we're sitting on the same side of the table?
That is why we're sitting right next to each other.
Excellent.
So I was going to take a moment to introduce our guest to our listeners.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to read the bio. Dr. Danita Brown Young is currently the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Before moving to Champaign, she served as the Vice Provost for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. Prior to that position, she worked in student affairs at Purdue University, including serving as the youngest and first African-American and first African-American woman Dean of Students at Purdue. Dr. Brown Young holds a BA in sociology and from Kent State University, an MA in community counseling from Loyola University Chicago, and earned her PhD in higher education administration from Ohio University. Dr. Brown Young is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, Sorority Incorporated, Links Incorporated, NASPA, and ACPA. She was awarded the NASPA Pillar of Profession Award in 2021. She served as the NASPA Board Chair for 2022 to 2023 and is currently serving on the NASPA First Gen Forward Board of Directors. And for those listeners, NASPA is an organization for student affairs professionals. And with over 25 years of experience in student affairs and higher education, Dr. Brown Young is an accomplished ambassador for students and understands the critical role student affairs must play in successfully meeting the land-grant promises of educational access and opportunity to help create a more socially just society. So welcome, Danita.
Thank you.
Yeah,
welcome.
Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yes.
This is fun.
So today we wanted to focus on you telling us about your journey and what you've learned about leadership along the way. So that's a lot, but we have, time.
That's a long journey, I'm telling you. I would say in terms of my journey, when you think about leadership, it started at a very early age, with my parents, my family. They were very active in the community, in the church, on their jobs. And I remember my first leadership role, my real leadership role was in 5th grade. I was captain of the safety patrol.
Okay.
So I have been protecting these streets and students since I was in grade school.
Do you still have your vest?
I probably do. I know in the flag, in the gold badge by you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But, and just be serving in leadership roles throughout high school, college. But one thing I've absolutely learned that it's really about people. And so I wanted to be a secondary education mathematics teacher. That's what I went to school to do. And then I changed my major after I did my teaching practicum because I felt like I could help those students a little bit differently and better. There were so many issues with mental health and financial issues and domestic violence that I switched my major to sociology, psychology, and I went to Loyola University to be in counseling. So I wanted to do counseling. So it's always been this helping profession. I really believe in pouring into individuals, and that's how we get to a better society. So it's about people. It's about helping people achieve their goals, effectively communicating, but just being upfront and honest and making sure that, we are, who we say we are in terms of with integrity and speaking and all of those issues.
Wonderful.
So what inspired you to pursue this career in student affairs? And, how is that inspiration and that journey influenced your leadership style and how you approach leadership?
I did not even know anything about student affairs when I went to Loyola. I was a graduate student in student development and in student affairs, and all the other graduate assistants were in this thing called college student personnel. And I'm like, I have no idea what that is and what you're doing. But, and I still remained in counseling, but I fell in love with the ability to really help students, develop students, get to know students and their families in a different way to help them graduate. I love commencement. That's like one of my favorite times because the stories, the struggles that students go through in order to achieve their goal and graduate. And so that really inspired me to want to be in student affairs. And I had some great mentors within student affairs that talked about the longevity, the challenges, but also the rewards of student affairs.
So on this podcast, we've mentioned before, instead of work-life balance, we talk about juggling all of those priorities, and some things take bigger priorities than others. And so I've done this crystal ball analogy and such. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit about, how do you juggle your professional responsibilities and your personal well-being?
Well, I'm so glad you do not use work-life balance, because that does not exist. I like to use the word integration. It's like, how do we delicately integrate all aspects of our lives? When we talk about balance, that means things are equal. Well, I don't know about you, but my life is never equal. With my child and husband and family, like, it's just never going to be that way. And so for me, I live my life like a diversified portfolio. And so there are some times where a higher percentage is to the family, and sometimes it's a higher percentage to work, or higher percentage to organizations that I serve in. But for the most part, in order to get through this juggle of a day, it is, one, I have to start myself out with centering myself, right? So I'm a Christian, so I believe in value of prayer to help set my day, because there's going to be lots of bumps that come throughout the day. So I center myself. But I also believe in building a network, becoming that engineer and an architect, and making sure that you surround yourself, build up people that you can lean on, depend on, that you can communicate with. Doesn't have to be a large group, but a small group that you can connect with. But also learning over the last few years to give myself grace and to give others grace. In fact, it was one of our division themes was grace, giving regular amounts of compassion and empathy, because we all make mistakes. We all, we go through life, and life brings us ups and downs, curveballs. And so, you have to give yourself some grace if you're not performing at the level of what you intend to perform, and give grace to other people, because you never know what people are going through and what they're battling.
Agreed.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the analogy of the diversified portfolio. I've never thought of it that way, but it's a really good way of doing that. You're the leader of a really large organization here at University of Illinois. And how do you try to model that for the other leaders in your organization? Because it's important for them to have that integrated life as well.
Very much so. Well, I definitely learned the diversified portfolio from the Danita Brown Young. She's the CEO of TIAA. And just really modeling that, being flexible. For me, I'm all about being flexible, particularly in this work environment, and know that people have gone through so much through the COVID pandemic and other pandemics that work has changed. How we deliver our services, it has changed. The expectations have changed at work. And so for me, it is about being flexible. But you got to know your team as well. You have to spend time getting to know individuals. So I try to get to know people. I try to visit different staff meetings, or, we have a fund committee, so to speak. We're always changing the name of it, but, we bring together at least the central office, and we do, little meals, or, we have little games that we play. There are some areas that do game day during like the lunch hour where people get together, because I love board games and just that connectivity. Oh yeah, connectivity. It's all about that.
So you mentioned centering prayer as something that you use in the morning, but once you kind of go over that threshold for work and chaos hits, like what do you do to kind of keep yourself grounded throughout the day?
Try to remain calm. Absolutely breathing, staying in constant communication with the team members, because something will happen, and just really talking with the appropriate people, trying to find out as much information if there is some crisis that occurs. But I'm really blessed that I have such a strong team that we depend on. We really believe in collaboration. So in order to be collaborative, that meant you had to spend some time building up relationships. And that is key, particularly in any work that you do, whether that's student affairs or academic affairs. You have to build relationships with people. You need to build your allies. You need folks that are going to be supportive, people who are going to be honest and straightforward with you so that we can achieve these goals. Because we know that, sometimes there are burnt relationships, there are power struggles that occur. So it is very important for us, for me, like once that threshold comes about, okay, I've spent some time building up relationships. And so if I need help or assistance and vice versa, then we should be working together.
So what are some of those biggest challenges, or can you share a big challenge that you've had as vice chancellor for student affairs, and how did you overcome it? So you've mentioned pandemic, you mentioned this. It's not an interview, but
there are lots of challenges. Anytime you're dealing with people, there's going to be challenges, particularly students. But, my challenges most of the day, believe it or not, are actually personnel. They can be personnel issues, the student issues. We try to be preventative, right? But luckily, we do have a lot of resources already in place in relationships. But when I think about the huge challenges, are really trying to balance a budget. Trying to meet students where they are, trying to look at the future to see what they need in terms of their skills and upskilling. There's just a lot that takes place within student affairs, and then dealing with the political headwinds that come across, the state legislators, the unfunded mandates that come along with some of these initiatives that they want us to implement for our students. And we have been fortunate enough that some of the mandates that come our way, that we've already been doing them.
Good.
And so we don't have to scramble to try to create some new initiatives to meet it.
So there was a challenge that came to mind that maybe you might be able to unpack a little bit more. Last semester, I recall that there was a strike or some type of grievance.
So things happen all the time, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that did.
Yeah. But just that time, can you tell the listeners a little bit more about how that impacted student affairs and what you had to do to kind of work through that?
Yeah, so right after Hills that we had this record-breaking enrollment, and we had a housing crunch, and kudos to our housing team because they really made it work. We were down 600 beds at that point, and they were very creative in making sure that all of our students had a place to live, a safe place to live. So they did some things in working with our private residences across. But then 2 weeks after we've got everybody moved in, we did have a strike from our building service workers and our food service workers. And I would say, we absolutely heard the voice of those who were striking and wanted to make sure that there was equity. So they decided to strike. And so we pulled together as a student affairs team. Other departments across the university came to help, and they served and helped clean. They helped cook. I know I personally was bouncing around to different residence halls and dining halls. And I tell you, I never made so many pizzas in my life. Buffalo hot sauce pizza and chicken and cutting vegetables. I tell you, it absolutely gave perspective. So, and I tell people we should be volunteering in those dining halls, in those buildings, at least once a month, right? As often as you can, because they go through a lot. It's a tough job to deal with, making sure that everything is prepped, everything is cooked. You're feeding thousands of students who are trying to hurry up, get their meal, go to study, go to class. And they do a fantastic job of delivering it day in and day out. So much props to all of our food service workers.
I remember when that was going on, that James Quisenberry, who's our counterpart in your organization, he sent me a picture of the thousands of cucumbers that he had sliced. And, you just get a real appreciation for all of the work that those people do on a daily basis. Absolutely.
To have nutritious food, right? It's so as you're talking about, we're cutting real vegetables and serving, the fresh fruits.
Yeah.
We're not using canned.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, I'm very proud of, is that we really pay attention to the nutritional value here on our campus. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So one of the things that we all as leaders need to do, and especially senior leaders, is to sort of see the horizon and see around the corner. So what trends do you see that are shaping the future of student affairs in higher education?
Artificial intelligence. It would be the top one.
Tell me more
and
about
technology,
that.
all these
Oh
gurus
my.
over here.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that I've been learning more about AI, and, I think people's perspective right off the bat is that it's so negative. It's going to make people lazy. It's going to get rid of people's jobs. But AI has been around since the 50s. And, we use it whether we know that we're using it or not.
Every single day.
Yep.
Every
Yeah.
single day. If we're using Google, now it's more pronounced with their AI assistant, but we've been using it for early warning assistance. And for our students, we've been using it for chatbots. I mean, anytime that people are using chatbots on their apps. And so it's not necessarily, okay, it can be negative, but let's find the positive of it. Let's see how it can help us. Let's see how it can help, strengthen our skill set to put us ahead. I know lots of folks who say, well, they're just, folks are just going to cheat. The students are going to cheat. Yes, there are some that will do that, right? There are non-students who will use it to get ahead and cheat. But a lot of times when I hear students, they say, well, I'll just use it just for a quick outline, but I will create the paper myself, but it'll just give me a starting point if I'm stuck. But I just think that it's time for us to really look at the advantages of artificial intelligence and how we could use it to kind of promote our jobs and to make them better.
Yeah, it's definitely not going away. So
No,
we
it's
have
not.
to figure out how
We have to embrace it.
embrace it
Yeah.
and manage it,
And create
be
some
intentional
policies,
about it.
and some parameters around it. I think that's for sure. The technology is definitely impacting, but we also, when I go back to the politics, we in higher education have to start, talking about the value of higher education. There are many people out there that just don't have the faith in higher education, particularly in public higher education. And so now it's time for us to really show and give that return on investment to people, make it more affordable, make it more accessible, helping them with their career exploration. And then, how does that help them with their own personal goals and contributing back to our society?
What do you think the big challenges that we have are kind of internally that we need, that leaders really need to have real conversations about for us so that we can really improve those things and restore that faith in higher ed?
Well, I think, like you said, we all need to come together and have some conversations. Sometimes here at the University of Illinois, we're a little decentralized sometimes.
A little.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are those silos. But what I have seen over the last few years is that people have really stepped up and shown their leadership to come together, because we want this to be the best institution. We want this to be the best experience for our students. And so, really being able to show, using the data, how our students are learning, how they are contributing to society, and what our faculty are doing too, with the research is just amazing. I mean, we're the leaders with this COVID pandemic. I mean, no other institution was doing what we were doing in terms of creating a test.
We might have been the safest place in
Absolutely.
the country.
To be
Yeah.
at that time.
100%. So
Yeah.
we have to get over sometimes that Midwest modesty, I think, and really start showing and telling people, who we are and the impact that we have on our world.
Go ahead.
No, so there are some of our listeners that work with students all day in and day out. And so are there any effective strategies that you found to really engage our students and hear their voices and hear from them directly? Like How do you do that?
I try to find out where they are, right?
Okay.
I can't wait for them to come to my office. They're not coming to Swanland, right? That's not the high traffic point at all. And so it is about spending time at their student organization meetings or finding out where events are happening, connecting in the union or connecting in some academic space. Sometimes I'll get invitations to symposiums or even to fine arts if they're
Doing performance.
performances and whatnot. But, for me personally, I do have a couple of groups that I meet with on a regular a basis one is called Lunch Bunch. So I meet with our top student leaders of student organizations about once a month. We have lunch with other administrators and we talk about other topics like budgets, like mental health. What is impacting their experience here? And then how can we problem solve together? How do we support each other? Or, working with our fraternities and sororities and meeting with their council presidents or the Alumni Union Board. So in student government, I meet with their leadership regularly just to, try to keep my finger on the pulse of what is happening. And, they are some dynamic, bright students who really push us to make sure that we're sustainable on this campus, that we are accessible, that we're paying attention to not just mental health, but well-being. That is really the goal, is to look at the overarching, composition of what makes you who you are and how do you support each other, right? We know that the finances play a role in people's mental health and physical health and looking at their spiritual health and well-being. So we have to take a better look and a deeper dive into this whole notion of being well-being.
And I love that holistic approach because it's not just, did they get education, but it's their home away from home when they're here at the University of Illinois.
What do you, from your perch, like, what is the state of student mental health right now? Because there's a lot of chatter online and in the news about it being this kind of crisis mode of student mental health. So from your perspective, like, what does it look like here at University of Illinois?
What I appreciate from our students is that they've removed the stigma about getting help for their mental health and understand that it's not always just going in and seeing a therapist and a counselor one-on-one. You can receive help in other places of your life dealing with stress and anxiety in a multi-pronged approach, I would say. And so they are taking advantage of that, whether it's doing groups or they are going over into campus recreation and working out, or they are getting involved in student organizations. So building that, that level of network and their friendships. I know with our health promoters over in McKinley Health, they are out all the time creating different wellness events, really reaching our students in their classrooms about, things that are impacting their physical health or mental health. So I would say they are taking advantage of it. We have embedded counselors in the academic units, which has also been a huge plus because that embedded counselor really gets to know the students of that academic college. Absolutely very accessible. Lots of discretion. You don't know who is seeing that embedded counselor at any time because it is pretty hidden, which I appreciate. But students are taking advantage of all of the resources. And there's online support too, right? We have a wellness.illinois.edu website for not just students, but our faculty and our staff to take advantage of too.
Yeah. How have you seen the impact of the pandemic? I know my son was a junior in high school when the pandemic hit. So he spent the second half of his junior year, all of his senior year in sort of this isolation mode. He's a senior here at Illinois now. So it doesn't seem to have impacted him deeply, but I can't imagine that we're not going to see sort of long-term, maybe positive and negative impacts of those students that were in high school during the pandemic and in those formative years where they're creating connection. How have you seen that play out here at Illinois?
I think it really depends on the student. We were absolutely worried about people's communication skills really diminishing. Yes, they can read and they're online, but actually, it's very difficult to make friends when you're sitting on a virtual platform, right? You're sitting and you got your box, but you can't just lean over and be like, hey, what's your name? As you would do in the classroom. And so we were very intentional about how do you start to build that social capacity? How do you get in, first take that step to get involved? What does engagement mean? Looking at their learning, it hasn't seemed to be a true impact as of yet. We don't know. But as you said, your son is thriving. He's a senior getting ready to graduate. But I think our faculty, our staff have spent a tremendous amount of time really trying to dig a little deeper into all aspects and support learning, tutoring, lots of mentoring, lots of coaching to get our students to open up to say, okay, I need help and ask for help, and then they receive the help that they need.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you talking about all the things that we're doing here in student affairs and how important that is. If there's someone looking to get into the field of student affairs, they hear this podcast, what aspiring, what advice would you give to those aspiring leaders that want to jump into that field?
Well, we don't do it for the money. Okay. We do it because we care. And we really want, students to achieve their goals. It's all about student success. And so we want them to thrive. Absolutely thriving in all areas. We don't want them just to be on campus, just kind of surviving. So if you have that heart, you have the passion, the dedication, and know that there are going to be lots of challenges that come your way. There are going to be times when that people are just going to be people. And sometimes they're going to discredit you. They are going to make up things. That's some of the higher level challenges if people don't get their way. But you got to kind of see through that and see past that. And if you really want to help people succeed, then student affairs is absolutely the place for you.
So the podcast name is Candid Conversations. And so we try to have these moments where we're really open about.
Chris likes to say, get real.
Get real. Yeah.
I'm a little scared now.
Candace thinks that dates me a little bit when I say get real, but tell us something that most people don't know about you.
Oh boy. If I wasn't in higher education and if I just had this dream fantasy job, I would be a backup singer and a backup dancer.
Oh,
how about that? That's as candid as I can get.
So where have you displayed your gift in the past?
I haven't really displayed that gift. I'll sing in the choir and in church and whatnot. I'll do some karaoke from time to time, but
fellow karaoke lover.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I might have to connect you with my son because he's a music technology major, so he could write you some beats and you can.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Yeah,
I think that would be fun. So
fantastic. So dive a little bit deeper. Like where do you? What's your biggest challenge as a leader? Like, where do you struggle as a leader?
Always trying to inspire and stay hopeful, particularly if I see a situation that looks doom and gloom, right? We're going through budget reductions across the campus. And, we did finally receive the percentage that we are going to be reducing our budgets. And it's how do you get all that input from people? How do you see what the impact is going to be on our students, the quality of their experience, but also the impact on the staff. Because we are already short-staffed in a number of our areas. We don't have large departments, contrary to what people think, that we have thousands and thousands of staff in student affairs. That doesn't happen. And we're very good stewards of our finances that we receive. But those are the big challenges, having to deliver that information and saying, okay, we as a team, leadership team, we've reviewed our budget reductions. Here are the projections, and these are where the cuts are going to be made, and having to deliver that information is very tough. I would also say anytime we lose a student on this campus, it's very difficult.
It's gotta be devastating.
Yes, absolutely. When you think about the impact to their families, their friends, You know, the faculty here that see them in their classrooms, that's also a challenge, right? Because they're part of our family and they will always be a part of our family. And so we're their, you know, they're family members. And so we try to make sure that we never forget who they are. So, but that is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any final takeaways that you want people listening to get from our session, our podcast today?
I would say, you know, when you're in leadership, you absolutely have to speak with integrity. You have to serve intensely. It's going to be you're going to be called upon. Give generously of your time and your talent, and sometimes you got to give that treasure too. But also stay humble. Stay true to who you are. You know, stay grounded as much as you can, and enjoy life and have fun. That's what I would say.
Lovely.
Lovely. Thank you so much for being a
you.
part of the show today. I think our viewers and listeners are going to get a lot of wisdom out of what you've shared today. So really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks.